James Baldwin, an excellent humanist writer, once said to a letter to his nephew, I believe it was, that when white people were in big trouble, that it was to the black man they turned for help. And he said, we have to strive as a people not to be accepted by white people. We have to strive as a people to accept them. I think of this when I ask myself, is there anything I can do as a speak out messenger for anybody who might hear me talk on the subject of Muslims? I'm not sure I'm capable of doing much to explain the situation, but I will do my level best. It might be wiser to ask Muslims to explain their acceptance of someone like me. There are very few complications in my good neighbor feelings for Muslims. I've gone to restaurants, community stores, schools, where I became acquainted with many different Muslims from all walks of life throughout the world. And they're attractive, they're reassuring people. I believe that misunderstanding is a major factor in the homespun attitudes that lead to opportunism that can be exploited when people do not feel it is in their own interest to protect Muslims as though they were protecting their own, when in reality, we're not any different. We're just people. Now, it will be argued that Muslims have a brand of extremism where they reject the idea that people who are not Muslim, are not religious, are just people, and that they fight amongst themselves too much. Well, I haven't followed all of the developments in the Muslim world, but I know enough about Western foreign policy that it's clear the government dehumanizes people who are subsistence farmers in Yemen, who are education advocates in Pakistan, who are struggling to secure their savings from American banks in Afghanistan, who are part of the democratic power in Russia, north of Syria, in Muslim traditional areas of the Russian Federation, rather than build on common decency, courtesy, and enlistment to common cause in issues like protecting the environment and biodiversity, learning to listen. I've listened to the Russian Federation leaders enough to know that they have great respect for their Muslim colleagues. It wasn't surprising to me that NATO's most powerful Muslim body, Turkey, took up negotiations with the Russian Federation over the Ukraine. It wasn't surprising to me that Russian diplomacy was able to secure an extension of the ceasefire in Yemen over the frustrating obstruction of American so-called interests. I know that America has sometimes acted wisely, as they did during the Suez Crisis with Egypt, by um, standing up to opportunistic so called allies, Israel and Britain. But I also know that in America, having grown up in the busing rages where people were lighting cars on fire, ridiculous things were going on, havoc, mayhem, fear mongering, and brutality, to protest simply living courteously in schools with our fellow man. What difference does it make if a person's black? They're entitled to go to school. They're entitled to cultivate genius, and we're to learn from one another. It's an informal grace throughout civilization. Everybody knows that now. Same holds true when it comes to the Muslim world. I believe that one of the things that obstructs our understanding is our unwillingness to disengage from media gangs who control programming, primarily from Hollywood, where certain stereotypes are allowed to form um, a villain empire of images. And rather than have the grace to show the subtle differences in culture, the things that, for example, cause resistance to certain forms of woke schooling among traditional lobbies in the Muslim world, or intermarriages between religion, things that are sensitive, that are sensible cultural studies, to enter our programming with sensitivity, knowledge, and dare I say, sentiment. Um, we create hate for fear of benign romance. And of course, underneath all of this is the dog whistle of sexualization. And women play a very tragic role in the oppression of Muslim women. It's not the act of genius for people who come from an era who have long since burned their bras and taken up pantsuits and briefcases to trigger school bombings by making it look like resistance to traditional hijab costumes, for example, attire, if you will, is somehow a cause worth fighting for. I know that right now Iran has had a disastrous encounter with female liberation due to their own intransigence, and that everybody who has any sense appears to be backing and encouraging rage against the traditionalists of the Muslim world. I'm not there. I assume that's right and proper in the sense that it's grossly inequitous for a woman to be mistreated because of her attire. My point is that a woman should not be mistreated because of her attire on either side of the traditional standpoint. In other words, a person should not have their head shorn because they want to wear a hijab. I'm deaf and I don't pronounce things correctly. Some women um, are in tears of struggle for their identity and heartbreaking loss as a result of being subordinated to extremists from the Muslim world who were brought about by the endless empowerment of artillery that comes from a U.S. foreign policy that refuses to humanize them. Subsistence farming was virtually rubbed out in Yemen in favor of cash crops to support the usual industrialization processes that have backfired all across the planet in terms of biosphere disaster. So, the goblin of the issue of the Muslim world is just that. It's a Halloween story. It has no meaning whatsoever. These people are your friends. They're courteous, intelligent, dignified, knowledgeable, well spoken, thoughtful, beautiful, redeeming people. And they should be treated that way in every presumption that we bring to the table. I used to say that the Islamic world helped me deal with the terrible neurological injury that I was forced to endure as a child. It helped give me the bravery to encounter my memories. There may not be all that much to credit about that when you look at the fact that a fundamentalist tripartite was put together through the extreme right wing. But it is something to consider. Having an open mind can be healing.